Welcome to the Career Jitsu Podcast, where we connect the art of Jiu-Jitsu with your career. Our mission is to empower and inspire you with engaging conversations and valuable insights from people just like you who benefit from the shared relationship between your workplace and the art of Jiu-Jitsu, leading you to a more fulfilling... Welcome to the Career Jitsu Podcast, your favorite podcast where we connect the art of Jiu-Jitsu to wonderful careers. Today, we are so excited to have an opportunity to talk with Dave Crull. Today, we are going to talk about something that I think a lot of BJJ practitioners and even people in high level or high performing positions in their workplace don't really think about too much, and I want to talk about it. So I think there's a lot of correlation between the art of jiu-jitsu and the corporate world. So in jiu-jitsu, we have ranks, right? So we start with our white belt and we go through the ranks of our belts, and we make a lot of mistakes in the beginning. So when we start training jiu-jitsu as a white belt, you make a lot of mistakes, and the mistakes are welcomed because you learn from those mistakes. But as you climb the ranks, when you get to blue belt and purple belt and brown belt, you need to start making less and less mistakes. And by the time you're a black belt, those mistakes really matter. You really have to make sure that you're not making as many mistakes. And in the corporate world, it's similar because when you have an entry level position, there's not as much pressure on you, and you can make mistakes and you can learn from those mistakes as you climb the corporate ladder. But as you get to a leadership position, senior leaders and executives can't afford to really make a lot of mistakes. So there's a lot of pressure on executives to make sure that things are being done right. So I equate that to an executive being a black belt in business, needing to try their best to not make as many mistakes. And when they do make, and mistakes happen, of course, but when a leader does make a mistake, they have to be able to know how to navigate that and deal with it. So Dave is an expert in this area. So Dave is an executive advisor, and he's a coach for senior leaders. He currently holds a position as the executive vice president and chief financial officer of Jackson Square Aviation. He has a wealth of experience as a CFO, a COO, a CEO, and a lot of experience in helping guide executives on how to be better leaders. So we're going to talk about that professional side of things, and we're going to connect that professional side of things with him in his experience with jiu-jitsu, because he is a black belt in jiu-jitsu, which is also an amazing connection because he has a wealth of experience. He's been training since 2007. He has his black belt under Rafael Formiga Barboza, who is a legend in the sport. I have heard of his name quite a few times. So he is a black belt under him. So we know that he's earned it for sure. So we are going to dive into the connections between having the experience that he has in jiu-jitsu and having the experience that he has in the corporate world. And we're going to make those connections and give our wonderful listeners some great insights today. So welcome aboard to the podcast, Dave.
And I love it, Jay. Thanks so much for having me on. I got to say, I was so happy when we made this connection, and you're kind of out there in the LinkedIn community now where there's not as big of a jiu-jitsu representation. And there's a ton of people like me that are out there that train, that have professional lives. And so to kind of like create these adjacencies and to be able to talk about it in this forum. I mean, usually I'm talking about jiu-jitsu with a whole different group of folks. And so I'm happy to kind of maybe bring this to a different crowd for once.
That's awesome, Dave. All right, so let's get started. Our audience wants to hear about the first part of this podcast, your jiu-jitsu. So we have a lot of jiu-jitsu listeners, so we like to get our background out there on what we've done in jiu-jitsu. So can you tell our audience a little bit about where you started training, how you found jiu-jitsu, kind of what your experience and your feeling was when you first started learning jiu-jitsu, and where you have taken that to today?
Yeah, I'd love to. It's so funny because nowadays, so many people know what jiu-jitsu is. You know, they've heard of Brazilian jiu-jitsu. They're very familiar with a lot of different fighting forms because professional fighting sports are so popular. And it wasn't that long ago that you needed to go to like Blockbuster and get a VHS tape if you wanted to watch the UFC, and like, that's how I started right there. When I was in the military, we had elements of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu that were layered into our close quarters combat training. And I remember sitting in a little training room and we were literally watching reruns of different UFC fights and talking about, pieces of a position or, breaking down technique or whatnot. And so that's where I was initially exposed to it. And then, like you said, in 2007, I had been out of the Marine Corps for a while and I wanted to get that back in my life. I'd always been a martial artist. And so, I had to go look for a place to train. And I lived in South Florida at the time, and there was a really good training center called BJJ Center, literally. And it was headed by a legend in the sport, Pablo Popovich, who, has gone on to do great things. And that's how I started. And then so from there, like the challenge in life was just kind of keeping it going. And every single time you've got a move or a big heavy travel year or whatnot to try to find ways to get the rounds in and get the mat time in. When you move, can you find another place to train? Can you reestablish yourself in the community? And that was sort of a theme for me all the way through Purple Belt. And then right around COVID time, I met Formiga, and he stood up his school, lucky for me, within, a couple miles from my house, and the rest is history. I found a guy that is just amazing at jiu-jitsu, but more importantly, like, he's just amazing at life, and he's become a real strong mentor to me and a really good friend and a family friend. And so I did get my black belt under him, which is an honor, but I mean, if I was a brown belt or a purple belt, I'd still be there doing it, So that's a little nutshell of jiu-jitsu for me.
Yeah, the relationships that you develop through jiu-jitsu, right?
Yeah.
Having that connection with somebody who gave you your black belt that you respect as a person,
Yeah,
is really important. And
it really is.
yeah,
Yeah. It's crazy because, like, in jiu-jitsu, and I don't know if you notice this on your mats or not, but I mean, it takes the opportunity to meet people and to create a community and to expand the network that you've got. It's there because there's people from all walks of life, but it takes an extra level of effort in order to really build those relationships. Just for example, like, kind of using the corporate world. I mean, there's people that I work with and I'm friends with, of course, and we'll go to lunch or we'll go do dinners or something like that after work, and we'll get to know one another. And you're a captive in a conversation for an hour or 2 hours. Like, you don't have that in jiu-jitsu. You have usually a couple minutes before class, a couple minutes after class. And so you start those conversations over and over again. And it can take a long time to really get to know somebody. And it's just a different level of relationship, like with all of those reps and all of that energy trading between one another. It's such an enriching part of my life. And like I said, I'm really happy to be able to talk about it in a community that I think needs it just as bad as anybody else. You associate jiu-jitsu guys with this different kind of class of folks, but I know plenty of lawyers and doctors that are just really good at it,
Yeah, it's great to see the various occupations in jiu-jitsu, and you meet so many different people from different walks of life,
Yeah,
So,
it's true. It's true.
and it helps you grow as a person too, being able to hear the perspectives of other people on the mats. And I
Yeah.
think that really translates over to the corporate world too, right?
It does. And I mean, in a lot of different ways. I mean, you were bringing up a couple of really good points on the intro. They're not points that I think a lot about on a daily basis, but there's definitely a lot of, at a minimum, adjacencies between, kind of some of the patterns that you see on the mats and then patterns that you see, in people's career growth and in the corporate world. So it's the other thing that I was going to say before we got too deep into the corporate side of it is that I was having a conversation with my wife today about this. I don't remember why, but we were talking about the camp that's up in your neck of the woods up in Maine. And I go up to this camp once a year, and it's a week basically just sort of training jiu-jitsu. And it's grown to the point now where, I mean, there's probably going to be 400 or 500 people, maybe even more. And people come from all walks of life. And so you just don't have many options like that or many other examples where you're able to get an exposure to so many different ways that people live and career fields that people have, because like in my world, like there's diversity. There's a lot of different types of people, but I mean, we're all kind of there for a very singular mission, and we all have similar backgrounds, similar educations. And so to be around different types of people, learn from them, see what they do, how they live their lives. It really is like kind of eye opening, it's so helpful and it changes the way you think, creates new pathways. I like it.
Yeah. And I think there's a little bit of a contrast there too between like, like if an organization like Jiu-Jitsu organizes an event or a camp where you have 400 people, they are all like-minded Jiu-Jitsu practitioners. And
Yeah.
they're kind of all on the same page. But if you go to a corporate camp, so, you have 400 people from a corporation there,
Eh,
there's going to be a lot of people that kind of there's going to be people that don't get along and
I
people that
know.
don't
I
see eye to
know.
eye. And I just think the bond is a very contrasting situation there with the bonds that are created in jujitsu versus, workplace.
It's true. It's true. There's a lot of like, what can you do for me naturally, like in the corporate culture? I mean, people are there for a reason. I mean, I don't think there's many people that would come and show up every single day and do, a lot of different types of jobs if they didn't have to. And so there, a lot of those interactions kind of start with even subconsciously, like, what am I going to get out of this relationship? I just don't
Mhm.
feel that on jujitsu. Like, you and I have
Right.
talked for a while now. I meet all kinds of new people every single time I go train. Every open mat, there's somebody else that comes in there, and I almost never start, the relationship with like, I wonder what this guy is going to show me. Like, I wonder what I'm going to learn from him. I mean,
Right.
I'm just genuinely curious of who they are as people, and I don't know. It's a little bit different. Something that we
I
can
think
learn from in the corporate side.
Yeah, definitely. I think in the corporate side, you definitely have this like concept of, this is my job and this is what I get paid to do.
Yeah,
And then there's a lot of people that they're getting paid to do it, but they don't really love it. And I think with jujitsu, what's great is you love it, and that's why you're there.
oh
So
man, you better love
it's
it.
a little easier.
You
You're
better
forced
love
to
it.
love it, right?
Yeah. Somebody
Yes.
asked me like, what do you think it takes to make it all the way, like whatever all the way is. I mean, to just continue into like a state of perpetuity. That's kind of how I can think about my own jujitsu, like black belt, brown belt, whatever belt, like I'm in a state of perpetuity. Like I'll probably never quit. And I feel like the thing that you've got to be able to have is the ability to withstand that lonely drive home. That drive when you're like, my God, today wasn't my day. You just kind of got tuned up or whatever happened on the mats, and like the ability to just be able to go back and put that in the rearview mirror, put your ego underneath yourself, and kind of go do it again. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's something, that's definitely a lesson that we could learn on the corporate side.
Yeah. So can we switch gears a little bit with this and talk about the professional side of things for you?
Yeah,
So can you give our listeners a little explanation in terms of your professional experience and how
sure.
you've gotten to where you are now?
Yeah, this it's kind of a unorthodox background, and people, that I interact with these days, they know me mostly, from a professional perspective as being a financial executive, and so what I do right now is, as you mentioned, I'm the CFO for a large aviation financing platform. That's where I spend the majority of my time. And then I also have a small advisory business where I'll focus on doing similar things for other, usually smaller companies, and then also executive coaching. It's something that I've kind of found my calling in that, I really enjoy working with people that are kind of at the crossroads of major life decisions and sort of helping them go across bridges that I've had to go through, either successfully or otherwise, and passing on that information. So it's something I've really loved. Very similar to coaching people in jiu-jitsu. I mean, it's just, you get those same sort of endorphins. But that's not how my career began. I mean, my career actually began as a mechanic. And when I look back, when I got out of the military, that's what I needed to do. I needed to make money. I needed to pay for college. I had no idea what I wanted to do when I grew up. And so I kind of hit a timing in the right way, and Delta Airlines was hiring in my city. And so I went and applied and I got a job, and I thought it was the greatest thing ever. I thought I had kind of hit the lottery, worked for a great company, did things that I really liked to do. And then, obviously you and I both live in the United States. I'm sure you remember September 11th, 2001. I mean, that sort of changed the trajectory of everything. And it really wreaked havoc on the industry that I was in. And really quickly, I got a lesson in some of the key differences between the environments that I'd been in before and where I was at now. And that is, it lacks meritocracy. And so in the military isn't perfect, but it is largely a meritocracy. Like people that perform do well. People that don't will get flushed out. In a large corporation, it's just not as simple as that. I found myself on a list of people that for no other reason other than the date we got hired, I was going to get laid off. And so all of a sudden, as this young 20-something-year-old, I'm kind of staring in the mirror. I had just finished college. I didn't know anything. And so I made a decision. I'm like, look, this finance thing is something I feel like, I'm getting pretty good at. I understand it for some reason. I got to do something anyway. And so I just made a shift, and from there, just started taking advantage of opportunities, no different than, anybody else would. Just really tried to put some ambition into this and grow my career. And I still do that today. I'm always looking for things that I could be the highest and best version of myself. And, people change. And so I'm sure I will as well. I have no idea what's going to end up happening 5 years from now, other than the fact that I'm going to continue to challenge myself and find ways that I could be useful. And like I said, the highest and best version. So that's a little bit of a kind of a nickel tour, but I like to go all the way back in time because I think many people don't really think about that. They don't know that that's kind of where I came from. And had it not been for some really, kind of crazy exogenous events, who knows? I probably would still be turning wrenches because I loved that job. That was the crazy part,
Yeah.
So life throws things at you.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I mean, I put a question out there on our LinkedIn page group about skills and experience versus mindset. And,
Really good.
so I want to get your perspective on this, Dave, because
Sure.
you're at the highest level of corporations working with people that are executives, right? So what is more important in executive leadership? Is it skills and knowledge and experiences, or is it mindset?
Man, that's a really interesting question. And it can go, it ebbs and flows. I think that both of those elements of both of those attributes are important at all levels. Like if you are in a phase where you're reliant more on your skills, but you lack a champion's mindset or a leader's mindset, you'll be limited in your growth. And I'll get into why in just a minute. And then likewise, like when you get up in the ranks in a corporate environment, if you rely only on your skills, then you're going to be inept as a leader. Like you will inevitably start stepping over your team. You'll probably burn yourself out and you'll limit the amount of leverage that you could use. Like you're one person and you probably have many people underneath you. And that's a skill that's very difficult for leaders to develop, is the ability to just let go. And so like these days, it is almost an overused colloquial term inside a corporate world about like leadership, and people mistake that for management, and they're two totally different things. And so a couple years ago, I started thinking through like, well, what does it mean to be a leader? Like, what is a leader's mindset? And, because like on the mats, for example, like there's a lot of different types of people, but there's also some really common attributes that people have, especially as they come up in the ranks, right? That you tend to become, not always start, but become physically fit. There's a little bit more of a drive and perhaps an aggression, not everybody's cut out like that in the corporate world, though. Not everybody is going to be the Eagle Scout, persona, troop leader, or the power broker or whatnot, and so how can those people also develop attributes of a leader? There's a company called Echelon Front that I train with a few of their guys. They have some really well-known ringleaders that sort of run this. But they developed something very specific, and I've kind of like tuned it down towards more corporate friendly terminology. And the mindset attributes that I will always look for, and that I'll always preach, and then I'll always try to find little corollaries towards, are accountability, aggression, adaptation, humility, and discipline. Like those 5 things right there. Like if something good happened and somebody says, hey, that person was a really good leader, like, well, which one of those buckets were they pulling from? And then if something went wrong, which one of those buckets could I have throttled up a bit on and done a little bit more with, Like, for example, I would still have a BlackBerry if I could, like I am not what you would call a first adopter, like there's a lot of, that's not necessarily a good leadership attribute, right? Like, so I think about that one that I just mentioned, that's a little bit more subtle, the adaptation, so what could I do to develop myself better and adapt more as a leader. I could take a $200 masterclass on AI, like things like that, things that I just wouldn't normally lean into. That develops myself as a skill, but it also gives me knowledge. It gives me information. It lets me show up better. And it gives me or it gives me an opportunity to demonstrate leadership to people that need it, And so anyway, that's a whole deep bucket to dive into there if we, but that's probably the way that I would sum that up and on my side from what I've seen.
What would you say that like so those are, primary characteristics really of what a leader should do and what they should have
Mm-hmm.
in their tool belt, right? Are there any like bad habits that you notice that like, executive leadership has, like, you experience like repeated behaviors from certain people, from different people that are in high performing positions or high level positions? What are some of like the bad habits that they have that they can break?
Well, one of them is one you just laid out before, and that is an over-reliance on yourself. Like and it happens all the time where you'll see functional leaders that come up in an organization and they take on something that's a little bit more enterprise level or entity level. And all of a sudden they have roles that roll up into them that they have no skill set in. They can't rely on that skill set anymore. And, you find yourself in a position where you quickly need to adapt some of those little more broader mindsets or traits so that you could use those people. Otherwise, they're going to be useless. They're going to be just blocked by you. And so like you could call it reliant on heroics or something along those lines. But I mean, it's an Achilles heel for a leader. Like until you're able to, channel your energy through your team rather than having them channeled through you, then, you're not going to be as good as you could possibly be. You might be getting away with things, but that'll come to an end at some point. And I felt this as well. Like my very first CFO job was a good opportunity to learn that the hard way, because there were suddenly things that I was responsible for that I really didn't have a strong functional knowledge in. And in some cases, and this has happened in many other cases in my career, or I didn't have any knowledge of it. And so now I've practiced that skill set a lot and I've developed the muscles around it and whatnot. And so it's easier for me to be able to approach it. But when it first happened, and just not to go too deep into it because it might be a little bit confusing, but my background is more in financial planning. It's not in like accounting and other things. As a CFO, you need to have a pretty wide and diverse skill set, but you're never going to be an expert in all of the things that are required. And so like I think about things like tax, accounting, different types of financial analysis. Like there's people that have a whole career in those fields, so you're never going to catch up to them. And so until you're willing to kind of let that loose and subordinate your ego a little bit and be disciplined to know that other people are going to have, more in the tank to offer you, how can you put them in a position to be their best, then, you're just never going to be as effective as you possibly can be. And that is an Achilles heel for many leaders. In the scenario that I laid out before, like I had a lot of comfort in my functional expertise. And like, I always knew that worst case scenario, if something goes sideways, I just need to work harder, but I can do it, So like maybe it costs me a night or two, maybe it costs me a weekend or two, maybe it really is a season of suffering, but I can handle it myself. When all of a sudden you can't rely on your own heroics anymore, then the whole equation changes. And some people never make it past that stage. Some people are promoted past that stage, but their skills aren't there, So it's a tough one.
Yeah. So like almost like what you're saying is you got to kind of put yourself in their shoes a little bit sometimes and kind of look at things from their perspective. And
Yeah.
it helps guide you in making your decisions a little bit too when you connect with people, right?
So true. Yeah. You have to realize that it's not about you. It's not about you. I mean, I am sure that you see this in your academy as well. I mean, you have people that it's a lot different teaching a kids class than it is teaching a master's class or a competition class, and so you have different skill sets there, but you still have to run the whole academy, so yeah, I mean, just in general, that's the thing is it's just not about you, and you've got to kind of step out of the way and have confidence to create some redundancy in yourself, and that's a tough one. It's easy to say, hard to do. Simple, not easy, I guess is the saying, right?
Yeah. I know in a lot of our podcast episodes, people have talked about the connections, how important it is to connect with people because, people won't care how much you know. I've said this many times in our podcast, people won't care how much you know until they know how much you care.
Good point.
And
Yeah.
being able to connect with people and develop relationships with people where there's a mutual level of respect there,
Yeah.
is something that leaders in every area should learn and
Yeah.
practice.
Absolutely.
Yeah. What do you, speaking of leading by example. So one of the things I was thinking about before this podcast is I was like, Dave is a pretty fit guy. And so I'm going to ask you this question, Dave. How important do you think physical health is for executive leaders? Because there's so much going on in their lives. A lot of people that are in, CEO, CFOs of corporations, there's a lot of responsibility on their shoulders. And they sometimes are working 60, 70 hours a week, right? So there's not a lot of time and there's a lot of stress. How important do you think it is for people in those positions to really still take the time out as much as they can, like really, really concentrate on trying to take care of their physical health?
Well, I think it depends on what their objectives are. Like if their objectives are to be able to live a long, healthy life, then you are exactly right that those demands and draws, and it isn't limited to just executives. I mean, people of all levels of an organization can find themselves subject to these tremendous amounts of stress. Whether they're getting paid for it or not, I guess is a different story. But certainly, like, in the role that I'm in, for example, just to speak personally about it, like my travel schedule has been incredible this last 12 months. Like it's just been a season of life for me where I've spent over 200 days on the road. That means taking you away from the mats, number one, and so like I needed to reset what some of my goals were, both in jiu-jitsu, but then also in my overall fitness. It takes you away from my kitchen. So like the ability to go and do my 3-egg omelet in the morning and get like exactly the dosings that I want, like all of a sudden that's subject to whatever's on the airplane that day or my own discipline to not indulge in something else, and so I guess the point in all that is that it's a choice that you need to make as a human before as an executive, because the executive world and life will just drain you and it'll hang you up wet and just let you dry and rot on the corner and then forget about you. Like I, no matter what my title is or what my responsibilities are right now, the minute I leave the organization that I'm in, I will be forgotten. That's the truth. Like I might have friends still that I stay in touch with, but the show is going to go on. I've watched this happen in my own career and positions that I've moved on from, and people that are around me that had a very, very important job and then left. And then I was there to pick up the pieces and I don't talk about them after that, So you better leave yourself in a way that's better than, or you better take care of yourself because nobody else is going to. And so yeah, those are choices. I mean, look, we could all do better. And I'm not in as good a shape as I would like to be, but I'm also pretty practical. Like I knew this year, given the travel schedule that I could not avoid, I'm not going to be the mat warrior that I was, and so like, but I can be disciplined with my schedule. Like even last week, I purposely planned my schedule so that I could get a couple sessions in. It wasn't the ones that I wanted. It wasn't the competition class that I would normally go to. But I can change my flight schedule so that I leave at 9:45 as opposed to 8 so that I could go to the 6:30 a.m. class, and then boom, like you start doing that for weeks. I got 5 rounds in on Tuesday morning, 5 times 52, do the math. That's another 250 rounds that I wouldn't have got if I didn't have those disciplines. And then the other thing is being really deliberate about, I can't be on the mats. So what could some objectives be? Well, it's really hard to get strong and train jiu-jitsu at the same time because it just destroys your body. And so this last year, I was like, look, I'm really going to focus on strength for the first time in probably a decade. I'm going to make that a real listed objective of mine and take advantage of the fact that I'm not always healing from those hard rounds. And it's a balance because then, I did get stronger and now I'm training and I'm getting gassed quicker. I got more muscle. I've got less cardio. So how do you balance all this stuff? Man, I don't know, but
Yeah.
But you can be
Well,
deliberate. You can make choices, and it doesn't have to be those that I laid out. But I mean, if you leave it to the default, then that lifestyle, it could kill you. And at a minimum, it'll destroy you.
yeah, I mean, and this is an advocation for jujitsu, right? Jujitsu, so many things that you can do and spend your time doing in terms of taking care of your physical health. But jujitsu builds, cardio, flexibility, strength and endurance, helps with your
Yeah.
body composition.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
So it's a multifaceted benefit,
I know.
to
It's so
jujitsu. So
addicting too, right? And like it's hard to replace that. So, you're not going to get that by doing an incline walk on the treadmill or something, you got to be aggressive if that's not there anymore. Like all the people that are
sure.
jujitsu people that are listening are probably like, yeah, it's really hard to replace. Can't do CrossFit's not going to get you there. Like none of these other things. We just know. I mean, the hard rounds are what's going to do it. And those aren't always available. You can't always do it. You might move to a town that just doesn't have that, so, but you can do something.
Yeah,
You,
so
you,
you
you,
heard it. You heard it straight from Dave's mouth right here, people. Career-oriented people, if you spend a lot of time in your career and you have limited amount of time to be able to take care of your physical health, jujitsu is the answer, right, Dave?
Man, it straight up is. And I'm not kidding about that though. Like, so for Megan and I have I guess you could call it kind of a concierge style program that we're working on in the background for people like me. And it is, and not just people like me. People, what I mean is like people that have such a limited schedule, but want to be a part of the jujitsu community. Maybe, and there could be a variety of reasons why they can't go to group classes, but and it could include like, hey, look, I'm 35, I've never done this, I've never had anybody grab my shoulder, yet alone like mount me, and so like I don't need, I want some kind of a gentler on ramp, but it's something I'm really passionate about because there are a lot of people that I know could maybe even have their life saved by this stuff. Like there are people that I work with right now that they think I'm joking around when I say like, man, I think you'd be a great jujitsu guy. They're like, no, you kidding me? Like, no way. Like my time has passed. I'm like, bro, it hasn't. I've seen it where guys walk in 50 years old, have never done anything. And then, they make it through. Like I want that message to get out there that this isn't something that's limited to some D1 athlete or somebody that's like quote unquote in their prime still. That's not every school will welcome that. Like I don't, you got to be careful what kind of an environment you put yourself in. But the jujitsu community as a whole is something that I hope I can train until I'm dead. I mean, I don't ever want to stop. I just have to train differently.
Yeah, the psychology behind things too. Like when you're physically fit and to a certain level, and you're in a position in a high level position. When you walk into a room, you want that command presence. I
Yeah,
know like in law enforcement, they talk about command presence in the sense that you walk into a situation, you have to immediately demand respect. And sometimes just the way you carry yourself and the confidence that you have and the confidence that you develop through training jujitsu, you walk into a room and you don't even have to say anything. You already are commanding that respect from everybody around you. And
yeah,
that's so important that you can translate that into the corporate world as well, for sure.
absolutely, absolutely. Like it's probably not even legal to use physical fitness as an attritter, but it is impossible for it not to be an influencing factor at some level. And, if you're interviewing for a job like this or, just interacting, I mean, every single day is kind of an interview, right? Like in an environment where you want to grow inside an organization. I mean, people see the habits that you show them on a daily basis. And so of course you could have a transformation, but I mean, you leave an impression, and somebody that is, careless with their physical fitness and their body and all of those other things. I mean, it does make me wonder, like, well, how do you live the rest of your life? And so that's not a blanket statement, but it is an impression and it's something that, you might as well make a good one. And like you said, when you walk in and you're fit and you're alert and you're mentally switched on from, all the stuff that we would do on the mats. And I mean, it's just, you're a different person. At least I am, at least I
Yeah.
am. I'll tell you one more thing about like that has really saved me with jujitsu. And there's other activities. It's not necessarily limited to jujitsu, but the singularity of focus that is required to be successful when you train is it like gives you a chance to kind of quote unquote wash your brain out a little bit, like dental floss for the brain. Like you just can't think about some of the problems that you had during the day or yesterday or that you will face in the further down the road when you're being choked out or when you're, in the middle of trying to, deconstruct a technique or something along those lines. I mean, you are in the moment, you're dealing with the problem that's right in front of your face. And I've had instances where I've walked into class, the weight of the world on my shoulders, had no idea how I was going to navigate, fill in the blank problem, trained, walked out, and the pathways started forming themselves. Because I had a chance to kind of stop thinking about it. Even if you try not to think about it or listen to a podcast or listen to the radio or whatever, like your brain's still going. Like you need something to kind of, like I said, like floss it out a little bit, And I can't think of a better activity than jiu-jitsu, even though I know there are some that are out there.
It's like a filter, huh?
Yeah. It's like it just shuts you down a little bit, gives you a chance to like let your brain take a break, come back to the problem later, but it just creates that white space that you need, that has happened multiple times to me.
Yeah. It's like the universal energy. You opened up the portals to the universal energy of wisdom.
Yeah. Like a palm of light or something like that. Yeah. I like it.
We have an episode that I'd like our audience to listen to if they haven't yet. Eric Sparaza. He's a corporate trainer.
Oh, really?
And
Interesting.
And since we're talking about this, one of the things he talks about in that podcast is he says, act as if. So what he means is you have to look it, feel it, and act it, And I think that when you walk it and when you walk with confidence and you feel good, about yourself and about others around you, you look the part, and then if you look the part, then you can feel the part. And if you feel the part, you can act the part.
Yeah.
Right?
That's true. That's so true. I like that. Act as if. That's good. Good stuff.
Act as if. Yeah. All right. Can we switch gears a little bit one of the things I also was thinking about before we came on this podcast is how important communication is. Because let me tell you a story. Last night I went to the Woo Sox. The Woo Sox is a AAA baseball team for the Boston Red Sox.
That's awesome.
And they're in Worcester, Mass. And my wife owns a dance school, and she set up a dance performance for her kids. And she went we showed up at the stadium, and the person who was supposedly running the event was kind of not really communicating well. She didn't let my wife know what was going on. It was kind of a little chaotic for the moment. I mean, we got through it and everything went fine, but it was a little chaotic and it could have ran a lot smoother. And then I asked my wife, did you talk to anybody about, the details of like where you should be meeting, who you should be talking to? What are the steps that you should take when you get there? And she looked at me like, oh, I just was told that somebody was going to meet me. And I'm like, okay, there's part of this is your fault. She didn't like it. It's my wife. It's my wife. But in any case, but the person also that it's two people's fault. My wife didn't ask questions, right? And the people who were running the organization also did not ask questions either, or give details as to what they were going to do and what steps needed to be taken, right?
Yeah.
So it was not necessary. I don't blame the person in that role. I blame the chain of command, because the chain of command needs to be like, you have to tell your people exactly what they need to say and communicate to the client or the customer exactly what is going on and the steps that need to be taken when you get there, so that everyone that down the ladder understands that they need to ask questions.
Yeah.
Right?
That's true.
Every person should be asking questions. The people that are in those positions guiding us through the process should be asking questions. And also my wife, who was on her end, should also be asking questions. Right?
Yeah, I totally agree. Totally agree. It's up to the leaders too. You need to create an environment where people will ask questions, and people that are in a senior position, an executive position of authority, like you might underestimate how intimidating an environment is. Like, hey, and people are different. People have different types of personalities. Like I have people that work for me that are highly extroverted, and they thrive off that energy. Like that's how they do their thinking. They talk, they verbalize things. And so if they have a question, they're just going to ask it whether they should or shouldn't. And then I have people that are incredibly introverted and they introspect on things, and they might not feel comfortable saying that, hey, like, I don't understand why we're doing this, or something along those lines. Like, so even if I say, like, I really encourage you all to ask questions, that doesn't mean that they're going to. And so, it is up to you as a leader to make sure that, you don't use a one size fits all approach, number one. And then two, that you have an environment where people are willing and able to, speak up if they need more clarity, a lot of times, I mean, like good leaders know the value of communication, but that's a little subtle thing right there where not everybody understands what you're talking about. And I've gotten to the point now where, especially in like smaller leadership groups, where if I feel like there's something that's not being said, like I'll just straight up ask, like, what is the question that you guys want to ask me right now that you're not asking? And then I'll come back to it. We'll go a couple more people through the table. And then next, one more time, what is it that you guys want to say that you're not saying? I could feel it in the room, like it's just kind of creating that channel for communication. I think there's levels to this, and I don't know if I don't know what it's going to take to get a black belt in it, but it's definitely something that you can level up on in leadership, is being a better communicator. Because what good am I if, like, we already established that I'm not this skilled person. I'm not the task person anymore, right? Like, you graduate from that, you're in charge of other things. So I don't do anything. So if that's the case, then, I'm sort of a channel for information. What good is that? What good am I if I'm not willing to pass that down? So developing people as leaders and making sure that they have the information that I have. There's a tendency for new leaders and I was going to say weak leaders, but we'll just say people that haven't developed the ability to kind of let that stuff flow through them, to think that, like, that's power. I've got information and, like, it's a need to know type situation. And it's true. There are things that are confidential. But most of the time, it's not that it's confidential. It's just that you're lazy as a leader. You don't want to go out and pass that information along, or you somehow even subconsciously feel like it makes you stronger or more valuable. I just don't believe that's the case. I think that's a great analogy to the mats as well, because, I'm sure you have instances like this all over where you've developed relations with your students, like relationships. And same with me and for me, like I have no fear of going and telling him, like, man, I flew in on a red eye last night. I really just need to get rounds. If you could not try to kill me as you pair us up today, like, I'm riddled with inflammation, I just need to shake some things loose. Like, that can't be every single time because you're not going to develop, but, like, he created an environment where I'm not afraid to go and say something like that. And it's up to me to discipline myself to know that if I need to sit, I need to sit. And if I sit all the time, I'm not going to get any better, but it was up to him to kind of create an environment where he's not gonna be like, hey, this is not a place where weakness thrives. You can't sit on the wall, like, this is get in there and get it done environment. There are places that would almost humiliate you if you tried to do something like that. So whatever the style is, I guess it's up to the individual place, but communicating what that is it's just as important on the mats, I think.
I love how you said you can't think in the terms of a one size fits all approach. I love that because it is so true. And you have to know your people,
Yeah.
As a leader, you have to know your people. I mean, sometimes you're in charge of a lot of people, but so you can't get to know everyone, but you've got to know at least the leaders that are being leaders, right?
Yeah.
Teach leaders how to be better leaders.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
Well, also, how do people's skills and individual attributes combine? Like, that's a big thing for me. And one of the objectives that I had in the role that I'm in right now, the corporate role that I'm in right now, has been an element of transformation in a group that was undergoing a significant amount of change. And so we had a lot of personnel that had come and gone due to some retirements and things. And so, I can go out and hire people and bring bodies in the door, but that's not going to be good long term. So it's about, like, how do these people come together? So who's the cornerstone of this? And then let me get to know this person. Let me get to know, like, understanding their psychometrics a little bit. Like, what kind of personality type are they? What kind of personal attributes do they have? Are they a dominant type of person? Do they rely on structure? Does that put them in a box and they can't operate in that. And then once you understand that, like, how do I supplement that? If I put two of them in a room, two people that are like high D personalities are going to go turning every desk over in the place. Sometimes you need to match it a little bit. And so, yeah, that is incredibly important. And I got to believe that you see this with your students too. I mean, I see it on our mats where there's people that are going to learn differently and people that are going to operate differently and have a different path. And that's totally okay,
Yeah. Yeah. The students are going to learn differently, and also coaches too. Coaches are going to be different too. So you got to treat your coaches. You can't treat every coach with the same, the same way as well. Like, you have to be able to teach them how to utilize their strengths to their advantage, and how they teach their teaching methodology.
Yeah.
I think that's the right word. Needs to be in alignment with what type of a class they're teaching, what students are in the class, and teaching them how to read people and get to know people a little bit and understand the way that they learn. Coaching is challenging because you have a lot of different personalities in one room, when
Yeah.
you're in jiu-jitsu, that you have to adapt to. But it's similar in the corporate world too, right? I mean, you have
Oh, yeah.
people that are in leadership positions, in coaching, I guess, per se, positions, that also have to know their people too, and be able to understand, how they think differently or act differently, and utilize their strengths and weaknesses to their, to their advantage.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Incredibly important, often overlooked too, believe it or not. It's obvious, but yet subtle,
Definitely. Yeah. We have another, so I keep referring to these podcasts in the past, but
I
we
love
have
it.
another one that another one of the guys that just popped in my mind. This is like early on, in our very first episodes. I think it's like episode 8 or something. Is one of our members of our gym. His name is Brandon LeBlanc, and he's a securities. He's licensed in securities,
Oh,
so he's a
really? Wow.
financial. I can't remember what position exactly it was that he has, but
Okay.
in any case, so my point is, Brandon talked about debriefing and how
Mm,
important debriefing is too,
yeah.
because in certain circumstances, like, for example, like, I talked about the Woosocks thing, right? So after that was over, I talked to my wife about it and said, these are the things that could have made it better on their part and on your
Hmm.
part.
Hmm.
I think we get that in jujitsu a lot, like, being open to constructive criticism is
Yeah.
so easy. And it's one of the benefits of jujitsu, because after a roll, you take the time to debrief and say, oh, this didn't work, or that didn't work, or, this position, when I had this grip, if you had just pulled my arm this way, that technique would have worked. And I feel like that debriefing concept in jujitsu translates so well into positions of like executive positions too, because you can start talking to your staff and your leaders, and how to make things better. Am I
Yeah.
on the page there?
Man, you're so right. I mean, it's a like creating with jujitsu is a little different because you're expected to get the feedback, like you're going to get it whether you want it or not. You might not get the next level, like the postmortem, like you just mentioned, which is like eminently more valuable, but like no matter what, if you roll, you're going to learn whether something works or it doesn't, and so it's almost involuntary to be able to go and ask a question afterwards or have somebody come up to you and be like, hey, what it was, I was just waiting for you to kind of like move forward and that changed the whole round. This is where the sort of fulcrum went the other way and learn instantaneous. It's just the opportunities are so plentiful. And the corporate world, it's a little different. And so on the leadership side, like you have to be really deliberate about that. And it's something that I'm still learning how to do a better job of. It's like, how can I be more deliberate about kind of flushing through things and talking about what's actually not working in an environment where that's not so normal, you know? And so I've tried a bunch of different things. Like one of the recent events that I tried was getting my main leadership team off site for half a day. So this isn't some huge lift. Set the expectation right up front with an agenda. And these are the handful of things that we're going to be talking about. Is there anything like that prepared differently? And then, having a legitimate open environment where we're going to talk about things that are probably going to hurt our feelings a little bit, but it's just that's what it's going to take in order to, kind of get to the next level. So if I've got one guy over here who's holding back because he doesn't want to be viewed as like being overly critical about something that's not necessarily in his mandate, well, we're not going to be as effective as we could be otherwise, and it goes back to like, having sort of more of a leverage of your folks. Like like, if it's just me, if you're relying on only my perspective, I'm one person, I've got four of you, and so all four of you are going to have to be willing to come up and be a little bit uncomfortable. And then you have to trust me. Like, I'm not going to, this video's or this, meeting's not being recorded. I'm not going to go clear the table off if I'm upset, The whole point is to get better. It's just not as normal in that environment. And that is a differentiator. Like, the leaders that are able to create and foster those environments and that successfully broker those conversations, because they don't happen normally, are just eminently more effective at what they do. No different than the student that spends time asking the instructor questions afterwards. Why can't I get out of side control? Like, you could figure that out on your own after a lot of suffering, or you might just have, problem with your frames,
Yeah, it's easy to listen. It's easy to listen to constructive criticism when you were like choked a certain way, and you're like, okay, I don't want to be choked again. So what did I do wrong, right?
Yeah.
But but
Yeah.
like you said, it's different in the corporate world. So how do you teach your executives to like open people up to constructive criticism? I mean, is there strategies that you use to get to have your people understand, like for them to get their staff or the people that they're working with to be more open to constructive criticism?
Well, the relationship itself is probably the foundation. I mean, like, for somebody to come and airdrop in and give a bunch of unsolicited feedback and then run back the other direction, isn't the best, approach, obviously, right? Like, that's a really embellished scenario right there. But if I know that my boss is coming to me, we have a mutual interest, whether I think what he's talking about is important or not. Like, it's not up to him to build a relationship with me. It's up to me to build the relationship with him, And so, like, I mean, I think it starts at that level. Like, and that means a lot of different things. It means being curious about what is making this person tick. And being curious means being actually curious, like learning the next level of an individual personally, if you have the opportunity to, that starts to set the table for different types of conversations. And then once a person understands that I have their best interest, or the leader has their best interests in mind, or mutual interests, whether it's popular or not, and they can trust that this isn't going to be some career limiting conversation that, is like some kind of corporate deposition or something,
Yeah.
then it's just easier to be able to accept some of that. The other thing is that leaders need to hold themselves accountable. Like, if my team fails to meet a deadline, if I go in there and I put all the blame on a low-level individual because something legitimately in their workflow didn't work, I mean, that's terrible, right? I mean, and so, like, that's a piece of it as well. Like, I let the team down here right now because I didn't communicate the importance of this deadline, and I didn't have the foresight to see that this workflow, 10 steps away from me, was going to break down. And that's a resource problem. Who's responsible for the resources? It's me. That's a
Right.
priority problem. Who's responsible for signing priorities? That's me. Is it delegated down? Of course it is, but like, something broke. I didn't ask enough questions. And now the other individual needs to be receptive as well to, like, something broke, right? Like, we need to get in there. We need to understand what it was. And if you take it personal the whole time, then this friction is going to just get worse. People that go against the grains of that will get splinters. But like, the relationship itself, the ability to take the mandate to take ownership as a leader, I mean, those right there tend to build the trust and the relational capital that is required for things like basic constructive criticism and the postmortem of something to be received a little bit differently. And then as individuals, and I am to this day still guilty of this, like, be open, like, this is just a job, like, so if somebody says something to you that is like critical of, we're not all of us anyway, are sending spaceships up in the air, like, this is, I mean, me, I do finance. What could possibly make me upset, about this? But yet sometimes I get my feelings hurt, and that's just once again, an opportunity to practice some of those leadership attributes and subordinate my ego, practice being humble and get on to the next day.
Practicing that balance between confidence and humility, right? A constant deliberate practice.
Oh my gosh, man. That is the simple but not easy right there.
Yes.
A lifelong exercise.
Ah, well, Dave, I'm looking at the time here and I'm like, wow, the time has gone by fast.
I know, man. It's easy
So,
conversation.
yeah, unfortunately, we don't have Frank, our wonderful other host with us today, but so I will do this wonderful segment of our show. And I will say that it is out time.
Okay,
So
cool.
tap out time, Dave, is when we just give our audience, our listeners, a big overview of what we learned today with some takeaways, right?
Cool.
So you heard it here, listeners. We have somebody who is has a lot of experience in his professional life, a lot of experience on the mats, and he's given us some great insights into how you can apply those principles to those jujitsu principles into the corporate world. And some of the things that are sticking out in my mind is when you talked about, like right just now, we talked about relationships and the connections that you make and how important it is for you to know your people and be able to connect with them. Because when you connect with them, you develop that mutual level of respect, and you start with a mutual level of respect in any conversation. The conversation ends up much easier. So that was one takeaway that I loved that we got from it. I loved when we talked about the physical health part of it, Dave, and how important it is to be able to carry yourself well.
Yeah.
I think being able to have that confidence to carry yourself well, it goes a long way, because people automatically also comes back to that respect thing. When you take care of yourself, other people realize, wow, if they take care of themselves, then they must be taking care of everything else in their life too.
Yeah. Yeah. It certainly is an impression piece.
Yeah. I loved in our conversation when you talked about the mindset that executives need to have in their leadership, and how it's great to have skills and it's great to have experience and degrees, but the mindset, if you don't have proper mindset, everything else is going to crumble. And when it does, and if it does, you have to be able to have that mindset to be able to adapt. I think you used the word adaptability,
Yeah.
and being able to be adaptive is a huge part of executive leadership, right?
Absolutely.
So,
Definitely one of the core mindset principles
yeah.
as a leader.
Yeah. And the last thing I think that our listeners can get from this is the characteristics that you talked about in having black belt leadership, right? So, I think being a black belt on the mats is one thing, but being a black belt as a leader is also just as important. But I think that the methods that you use, the principles, the concepts that you use to be a black belt leader, you mentioned things like humility, confidence, communication skills, and some other words that you use there. I didn't write them down, but character is so important. I think the wonderful thing about jujitsu is it really sharpens your character.
Yeah.
And
Oh, it does. It reveals it.
yeah, and allows you to be a better leader, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And if I could talk just a little bit about a nonprofit that I'm involved in,
Oh, yes.
just
Yes.
really quick. And I don't remember what episode it was, but you had Sam Snow on, who's a good friend of mine. And Sam and his wife, Jessica, are jujitsu entrepreneurs. They created a nonprofit here in the DFW area called the Mat Mission. I'm on the board of the Mat Mission. It's something that I partnered with on my podcast. And I just wanted to kind of drop a little quick note in there for everybody that's out there. So the Mat Mission essentially is charged with providing mentorship and leadership to youth in underprivileged communities. And we do that by sponsoring kids at a variety of different partner gyms, or sponsoring gyms themselves. And so we have a couple community projects where there have been gyms in areas that wouldn't otherwise have the availability of jujitsu and the benefits in the community that jujitsu provides to people that really need it. And we've sponsored those. And then we've also partnered with gyms throughout the area and throughout the United States, and sponsored a variety of different kids so that they could have the opportunity to learn from folks like yourself, and then folks like me and everybody else. And so if that's something that speaks to you, go to matmission.com. You'll have an opportunity to kind of peruse what we do, interact with our social media on Instagram at the Matt Mission, or just ping me directly. Definitely wanted to kind of get that out there. It's something I'm really passionate about, and it's one of those things that just I can't talk enough about.
Yeah, I'm sorry that I forgot to mention that.
No, not at all, not at all. Easy.
But Matt, yeah, so you heard it, listeners. I'm going to put that link in our description. So if you're listening to this podcast, just go ahead and check out that link in the description. Matt Mission.
The Matt Mission, yep.
And we did have Sam Snow on one of our podcasts, and that's how Dave and I met. So if you want to look back at some episodes, I don't remember what number episode Sam Snow was, but he is a great person in Jiu-Jitsu, and he's a great human being, and listen to his podcast as well. And the other thing, Dave, that I didn't mention in the podcast is that Dave has a podcast as well. So we are fellow podcasters.
That's awesome, right?
Being a fellow podcaster is great. It's the first time we've had somebody on our show that's a fellow podcaster. So,
cool.
So thank you so much. So Dave's podcast is called BJJ Executives, or Executive BJJ Executive.
It's called the BJJ Executive, and what I like to do is interview people that have been really successful in whatever profession of life they're in, and then also in jiu-jitsu. And I've just learned over the years that success leaves all these clues. And so, we kind of break it down and chop up the jiu-jitsu experience a little bit, but then also focus on the balance of it all and how you don't always have to be full throttle in jiu-jitsu in your family and in life. It's natural for those seasons to sort of commingle, and it's necessary for them to commingle in order for you to really make it all the way. And so that's if you like those types of things, then yeah, at BJJ Executive on Instagram, and then anywhere you can do a podcast, Spotify or whatever.
If you love the Career Jitsu podcast, you will also love the BJJ Executives podcast too. So we'll leave that link in our description as well, Dave.
Good stuff. Right. Appreciate that.
Well, thank you so much. We appreciate all of your time and valuable insights you gave our listeners today, Dave.
Thank you. I love that you're doing this. It's awesome. I'm so glad to see people out there. You're hitting a community that didn't get this information before from me or anybody else that I know of. And so it's just so good to see that out there. And this is the beginning of a relationship. We talked a lot about relationships. And so I'm so happy to have the opportunity to have been on here. Thanks so much, Jay.
Yes. Awesome. All right, Dave. You have a great day, okay?
You too. All right.
All right. See you, buddy.
Well, there you have it. As we wrap up today's episode, let's take a moment to reflect on the powerful connections we've explored between the art of jiu-jitsu and your career. In your workplace and in jiu-jitsu, you learn to adapt and navigate challenges. So remember that persistence and the courage to embrace the lessons that you learn are the keys to your growth both on the mat and in your career.